Okay, we're getting towards the end of our session here. The reason why we're here is we're gonna address that shortly. And so we've been talking a lot about the fat, dumb, and happy model. And so let's look at some other models, because really why we're here is to understand how all these different models interact with each other. So what are some of the other models? One of them is the resource extraction, the royal resource extraction model. And again, a pyramid is something that's stable by nature of the fact that there's factors in it that feed each other and keep it stable. So the idea behind this model is we identify a resource that we want, and it's often oil, and we would be like, for example, a sponsor. We would then identify a monarchy or create a monarchy in that country and make a deal with them. Basically, we're going to provide them with money and maybe food and arms, and they'll provide us with the resource. But they actually have a problem. They need to talk out of both sides of their mouth because their population is going to be angry at what's happening, so they have to distract the population, a decoy, turn them into dogs, and create an enemy that the population can hate, so the population doesn't focus on the monarchy. And the irony is often the sponsor becomes that enemy. Another pyramid is the resource extraction debt model, which we already covered. There's another resource extraction structure which involves a dictator, where the dictator themselves has really created the structure, and they're really the one in control. And this one's actually quite simple. They have a resource, again, often oil, but sometimes minerals and materials. They sell it on the open market, and the open market gives them money, and there's a wall. The open market doesn't want to peer inside their silo. They don't want to know the conditions upon which those resources are extracted, the poverty and the working conditions and the so on. And then that dictator hands off money to people below him, often involving the military, and the pyramid is very flat. So there's a lot of sheep on the bottom who don't know what's happening and are living in fear. Another pyramid is the practical central planning pyramid, which is very, very powerful, very, very important. And this one is very common in Asia. And that's one where you have a third world country that wants to enter the first world. And so rather than use capitalism, sort of a laissez-faire, let it happen, they identify key industries. And they use the nationalism, the feeling of everybody being the same and the love of the country to really bond people together to work hard. And to create these industries, sell them on the open market, the global market, and they take the money and they hand it again down the pyramid, but much more equitably. They also tend to absorb a lot of intellectual property from overseas, and so they become very, very strong. The final one is pretty much no longer in existence, which is idealistic central planning, and that would be, of course, communism. And of course, communism doesn't mean anything. In China, the Communist Party is a meaningless statement. It's just the name of the party. And the idea there is central planning, but it's in a dream world. You're just endlessly promoting these idealisms, and you're creating walls of hiding information of your failures and hide the lavish lifestyle of the people in charge. And basically, those organizations, those pyramids fall on their sword and fail. And so, what are similar about these different pyramids? One is they're all pyramid and they all involve handouts, but there are differences. For example, in our pyramid, our control tactics are very, very subtle. Whereas in practical central planning, it's all about the nationalism, and in other ones, they're just outright fear and guns. But the control is still there. And see, the idea is that the pyramid has to be the right shape. It can't be too steep or too shallow, depending on the population. And so let's assess some of these pyramids. Our fat, dumb, and happy pyramid works very well, but it's really only been around for 50 years. It's less than 100 years. We don't know what's going to happen to it. The resource extraction pyramids are what we call quasi-stable. They're important, but they're kind of unstable. But if we give enough money and enough arms and attention, they tend to be stable over short periods of time. The idealistic central planning pyramids, they fall on their sword, they're gone. But the practical central planning is very stable and is very, very different from ours. And just the fact that it's different is cause for alarm. Right now, it appears as though we are stable, but as we run out of resources, we're going to run into potential strife here. So something to ponder before we go on a break. Let's look at the relation between these pyramids, the primary pyramids. The fat, dumb, and happy pyramid and the practical central pyramid have a relationship. Whereas they ship us goods, we send them money, and then we end up sending them inadvertently a lot of our intellectual property. Now this practical central planning pyramid is growing very, very fast. And then we're all extracting resources from these smaller pyramids. So the question to think about when we go on the break, and we're going to address this in our last session for today, is what does this mean? So we're going to take a break, and before we get into the future, which is the essence of why we're here, we're going to talk about one more control mechanism, which is the most powerful and the most important.